Alright lads, a lot of progress made since the last video, so this is gonna be way faster and less specific. So let's get into it. Now that I had some architecture and UI systems done, it was time to move on and make the basics of what it is actually a video game. For that, what I needed is data. A video game, whichever the genre, is just data flowing, and this game will rely heavily on data and data tables. So I had a couple options. To use custom resources. Custom resources are amazing, but definitely I don't want to navigate around zillions of files just to change values one by one. That would be so time consuming and not so efficient, so I discarded it. What I needed is just to have everything on datasheets to visualize and edit values as fast as possible, like old school style, not so fancy, more complicated to set up, but then way faster once everything is working. One typical way of doing this is by using Google Sheets instead of Excel or similar, as it has the capability of exporting data in JSON format. And that's quite cool, but you have to export everything by hand, one by one, on every change, then move the files to the project. And yeah, that's 100% a no-go for me. So since I'm a Emacs user, I dig around org mode, and yeah, it has support for data tables, but it even has support for exporting them in CSV format. So I made a database file with all the tables I'm needing on the fly, and then just binded a hotkey to export them directly to the project. This way I have all the data in a single document, instead of many files or many files with different data sheets inside that you have to export one by one then. Well, it doesn't look fancy, but believe me, this way saves a lot of effort and time later on when I need to iterate on values and set up stuff. I export those tables in TXT, as CSV were giving me some problems, but the format of the text is exactly the same. Then I load the database in the first singleton by parsing those TXT files and apply some processing to convert all the data into a usable dictionary. And that's it. Now adding or modifying data is lightning fast and requires less code and tinkering. Once the database was set up and working, it allowed me to start doing the very basics of the save system and the character creation. I'm not going to work too hard on this right now until I have the main characters fully done, but I wanted to add some data placeholder to test that is going to work later with different values as color codes or floats. Now, for example, if I want to add a new custom character option, I just add the default data to the database and a master prop view element I created with its key, and it should be usable in minutes. Also, I made a random character button to avoid this process for debugging and testing and such. Now into the game, just made a really quick and clunky locomotion system, so it's not that boring to play with. Then I decided to change the input and camera to WSD movement. Firstly, it was a click-to-go system, but I decided to change this due that it's not an action game at all, so you have your hands free. I think more input in a way ties the player to the game and adds a tiny bit of immersion. Then I won't have problems with clicking behind the walls or upper surfaces. I don't have to rely that much on pathfinding. And of course it's more controller friendly, if necessary at some point. And as a cons, you can't eat a kebab while playing. Jumping to the game itself, the character has the ability to foresee the chances of everything that happens, so it's sort of a roguelike based on advancing rooms by taking decisions based on those chances and such. Following feedback from a good friend, realized that these chances mechanics should have a bit of work on visuals, as it's going to be a part of the game at all times. So I made a chance and choice system that consists of pie menus and a wheel representing the generated random value that will be affected by player stats and other parameters. I wanted to make it more visual and less text-based, so I needed some icons. And as you know, I don't like repetitive processes or dealing with many files. I made a Blender scene with all the icons I'm gonna use, and I made a simple export script that renders and saves them directly into the project. Same applies to custom cursors. But to be honest, a lot of work to do here, as this sort of visual communication is kinda difficult to make properly. So yeah, for example, the character can foresee the chances of what's inside the next room, so he can decide where to go based on those chances. That leads me to the room generation issue. Here is where I struggled a little bit, because I wanted the character to always have 3 choices for consistency, and different room sizes and such. The problem here is that generating a map that way makes it incredibly difficult, as sooner or later it would collide with previous rooms. So I tried hard with different ways and algorithms until one day I realized, is this fucking necessary? I was wasting time on a useless feature. You can't go back to former rooms, so what is the point of keeping the full map besides watching them lights off from the top? So fuck it. Just remove the branch and let the map to just have your current room and the former one as much. The thing here is just to point out how easy it is as a solo dev to just get out of the scope and waste time on unnecessary shit like this. Such a problem we all have and that we must learn to deal with. Well, choice taken, a probability rolls and the room is created. At this point, I only have one placeholder room that contains some trials to solve, like some traps with some choices to interact along some chances of success or failure. And once you interact, again, probability rolls based on your choice and apply effects to the character. Still working on visuals and then in audio later on to make those effects noticeable to the player and make more sense of impact. So I made a notification system that shows up the result and payload of the action, simple screen effects in case of damage, for example, and then update the HUD. To be done is to include the so important sound effects and proper animations. And then after trial completion, player is able to interact with some stuff and move on to the next. As this is sort of a roguelite game in a way, permadeath is present, but it's not over, it's not only one shot. In a nutshell, when the character dies, he loses some will and it's not over until your will is totally depleted. So you can start over, but it's not from zero, but that's for later on in development. I wanted to sort out first the basics of what I call the death cycle. By dying, clearing the scene, switching to placeholder cinematics, duplicating the character, connect all the signals so those scenes can be as long as needed, process will loss and check permadeath, save game, restore player, or back to menu, respawn, etc. So if perma died, it will reflect on the character selection list and you won't be able to play with him anymore. Well, enough for today. This sums up the progress on the very basic game core loop. Hope you find it interesting and of course any feedback is welcome. A lot of work ahead, so see you in the next update. Cheers!